Okay, good morning.
Morning.
All right, let's go through and make sure we have all the exhibits marked. So this is what I have. I have for plaintiff's exhibits we marked yesterday. Exhibits 1 through 24 are admitted. And I've got something else here that I got yesterday, middle of the day, plaintiff's notice of filing supplemental trial exhibit. Let me see what it is. Bunch of charts.
Just to clarify, that's the current to date Department of Health stats, not the most current available. So we filed that in the morning, Your Honor.
Is there, I have not admitted this yet, have I?
I think it was filed by the time we asked for everything to be admitted in total. We just had not printed it off. I don't know if you printed it off and had it.
Is there any objection to this exhibit from the defense standpoint?
No, Your Honor, subject to what we talked about yesterday, no.
Okay. All right, just a second. Just remember there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 plus lawyers. There's one of me. So there's a lot for me to juggle, not only in this case, but in multiple other cases. I don't see that this has an exhibit number on it.
Correct, Your Honor. I think we may have noted that in the notice of filing, that it would be 44. I'm sorry, it would be 25. I apologize.
Okay, your notice of filing. I don't see that. Where?
We make sure we email it to you directly, but we filed with the clerk's office.
I see a notice of filing supplemental trial exhibit. I don't see anything about an exhibit number unless you're talking about something that I don't have.
Let's see. My recollection was that we were naming it 25 in the notice of filing. If not, that would be next in order anyway. So,
all right, I'm going to call it 25 then.
we did not. We just noted the Florida Department of Health data stats filed on August 20, 2021. So,
okay, so plaintiff's exhibits 1 through 25 are admitted. Have I omitted any plaintiff's exhibit to date?
no, Your Honor.
Okay, so then let me see if I can find a place to put this. There's that. Now we go to defendant's exhibits. I have 1 through 16. This first notebook, any objection to any of those?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, so let me put a stamp on this. 2-1 CA 1382. And this is defendant's exhibit 1 through 16. Are admitted. 824. 2-1. All right, those are admitted. That goes right down there. Now I have plaintiff's exhibits 17 through,
Defense.
I'm sorry, defense exhibit 17 through 42. Any objection to those?
No, Your Honor. Those were timely provided.
Okay. Uh-oh. I think I know what's coming up next. 21 CA 1382. 21 CA 1382. Defendants 17 through 42. Those are admitted. 824. Okay, those go down on the floor next to me. All right, next. Defendant's exhibit 11. Dr. Bhattacharya's declaration with articles. Exhibit 14. Any objection to that?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, now there's just one declaration inside this folder. It's like one with a sticker number on it, one plain one. So I'm just gonna, hold on, let me make sure it's got Bates numbers on it from, looks like it's like 29 pages. This appears to be the same thing. It's through page 19, 1 through 19. It shouldn't be all that difficult, but let me see if I have two copies of the same thing or something different. So I have it. This is exhibit, the Stanford doctor's declaration, 19 pages long, signed August 18, 21. And then there's some other stuff attached to it, which is apparently, it starts with one of his articles, 8/20/21, masks for children, muzzles for COVID-19 news. And it says, in the guise of combating misinformation, YouTube again censors scientific data over pandemic policy. So that's the first article after his affidavit.
Yes, Your Honor.
So I'm going to admit exhibit 14. Is there any objection if I don't include the second copy of that in the folder? I'm trying not to confuse the clerk.
No, Your Honor, there's no objection.
Okay, good. All right, I've read everything, but I might just make this extra work copy. I'll put it over here. You've given me a work copy too. I appreciate that. So this is CA 1382 defendants. Exhibit 14, right? Eight, 2, 4, 2, 1. Exhibit 14 admitted. Just to explain to those who don't understand lawyers shorthand, often lawyers, at least in my generation, for plaintiff, they use the pi mark, you know, a T with 2 legs on it, that's a pi mark. And for defendant, they use a triangle, which is delta. So nothing to do with the delta variant. It's just the way lawyers use shorthand to mark. So I put the triangle for for defendant. What did I do for plaintiff? I use the pi mark for plaintiff. So anyone who's gets upset over that, that's what's been going on for at least the last 45 years that I know of in exhibit marking. Okay, so now we have the defendant's amended exhibit list, and we have a series of exhibits, and we can just go through them. 43, which is COVID-19 summary of cases. It's data from September 20 to March 22. I don't know where it's from. Can y'all tell me where this is from?
From the Department of Health, Your Honor. Florida Department of Health.
Florida DOH. Okay,
Yes,
any
sir.
objection to 43?
None from plaintiffs.
Okay, 43 is admitted. I'm going to stamp each one of those. 21CA 1382 defendants exhibit 43. Is admitted. On the floor with the other exhibits. 44 looks like some data from the Department of Education. Any objection to that?
No objection from plaintiffs.
Okay, 44 is admitted. Let me fill out the stamp. And that's 44. And I think the defense counsel were kind enough to provide me with a work copy, so I'm just going to label this work copy. 44 work copy for me. I appreciate that. This is going to go right there. This goes right here. Exhibit 45, which is Department of Education letter or memo from Corcoran to school superintendents 4/14/21. Any objection to that?
So we would make a blanket objection to 45 through 48. As the court may recall, we were under a Friday exhibit and witness disclosure deadline. 45 through 48 were provided sometime yesterday after 4 p.m. And I would tether back to our disclosures. On our disclosure, we preemptively stated under paragraph 44 that we were going to add any state or federal government reporting released on Monday, August 23rd through Wednesday, August 25th, showing COVID stats for Florida. That was the 8 a.m. filing from yesterday. So our supplementary filing occurred prior to the day's events of yesterday. Today's, we have a full trial day behind us of witness testimony from doctors and as well as lay witnesses. And now we have 4 additional exhibits that were served, after the 4 p.m. hour yesterday. Most concerning is the fact that there was a kind of a cavalier approach to the witness cross-examinations, as if these documents were already filed of record in this case or timely compliant. When we raised the issue, we don't have these. We don't know what you're talking about. The response from defense counsel was, oh, it was emailed about 15 minutes ago. So, obviously we have disclosure for a reason. In terms of prejudice, this kind of case, every hour matters, every minute matters. And so to not have those over the weekend and have those in advance of Monday does cause prejudice to the plaintiffs in our global trial strategy.
Global trial strategy?
Just knowing what's out there, sure.
Okay. You're referring to 47 and 48. Those are the only.
I think 40, 45, 46, 46.
Well, I know, but I don't think there were any questions asked on 45 and 46. 47 and 48 were the 2 exhibits that questions were asked about.
Sure. Well, I'm sorry. If I was indicating that there were questions regarding all those, that was not my intent. I was talking about purely the CDC report of a certain date that was proper to multiple.
So apparently you haven't read Exhibit 48, or you wouldn't be objecting to it, Mr. Gallagher. I have read it. I can't understand why you're objecting to it.
Mask ventilation in schools?
Yes.
Okay. Well, my 48, yes, I'm not talking about 48. I apologize. I'm talking about the yesterday's.
You don't object to 48 going in. Okay, let me mark that. 21 CA 1382, defendants 48, admitted 824 21, exhibit 48 admitted. How about 45? Face mask and emotions. Did you read that one?
I did, yes. The memo that was sent to all schools regarding.
I'm sorry. I meant to say 47, face mask and emotions.
Correct. We would object to that
one. Yesterday. Have you read that one?
The masking impairs what we read emotion-wise? Yes.
It says, if I'm looking at what I call executive summary on the first page, which is about, an inch and a half long, it says, specifically, a mask obstructing a face limits the ability of children of all ages, limits the ability of people of all ages to infer emotions expressed by facial features. But the difficulties associated with the mask use are significantly pronounced in children aged 3 to 5. Yeah, last time I checked, but usually you were six when you entered first grade. I guess you could be 5 in kindergarten. So you object to this? I haven't read the whole article. I have looked through it, and I've looked through it. I've read the beginning part, the conclusions, etc. So
we would not object to 47.
No, what?
We would not object to 47.
Okay. Okay, so 21 CA. When I say, just for the people who aren't lawyers, I'm just putting the case number on the top of every exhibit. That's why I keep repeating the case number. And this is defendants 47, 824, 21, exhibit 47 admitted. Okay, that's admitted. So now we're looking at 45 and 46. 45, here's what I get from this. This is a letter from one of the defendants, Mr. Commissioner Corcoran, in April. And it talks about, you know, I guess the parts that he really wanted to emphasize, he has in bold and underlined on there, but data shows us that districts' face covering policies do not impact the spread of the virus. Face coverings are a personal decision, and certainly families and individuals should maintain their ability to make a decision that is unique to their circumstances. Covering policies serve no remaining good at this point in our schools. Such policies may impede instruction in certain cases, especially for students with disabilities and English language learners who benefit from viewing a teacher's mouth. We ask that districts which are currently implementing a mandated coverage-based covering policy provides their policy to be voluntary. So this is as I understand it, a memo from one of the defendants, the school district superintendents. It's while the state of emergency was still in effect, which it was not when the governor's order was passed. And it's before the passing of the Florida Bill of Rights, which was signed by the governor and went into effect July 1. And also, there are other things. So what is your prejudice for this? Because doesn't this reflect the position that the defendants have taken throughout this whole case?
It is consistent, yes, but this letter does reference data being utilized, but no data accompanies the letter.
Well, it says what it says. So, but what is the? I think don't you already know the data the defendant's relying on? It's in like 3 huge books.
Certainly, we'll withdraw our objection to that.
Okay. I just want to say that we're on very accelerated time schedules, and some of the deadlines and cutoffs and things like that we have to be flexible on for both sides. So I'm just looking for unfair prejudice and surprise. This doesn't strike me as being unfair. See, 1382, defendants 45, 8. Why can't I remember today's date? 8/24. Exhibit 45 admitted. Okay, and I'll also say I think the defendants have kindly provided me with a work copy, so I'm just going to note that work copy. 45. And next we have an affidavit. I'm assuming since both sides are putting in affidavits, y'all have agreed to waive hearsay from
Yes,
both
Your Honor.
sides?
Yes, Your Honor.
We've agreed, but this is not an affidavit, this is a declaration, and it's not signed either, it's typewritten as a response. But for the purposes of time, we'll withdraw our objection to 46 and let that come in with the caveat that, again, we can challenge that on the basis it's not signed. And
All right, there is a Florida statute that allows a declaration to have the same binding effect of the affidavit if it's done with the right language. It always takes me about an hour to find that statute because it's not in a logical place. But this looks like it is intended, I assume, Mr. Bean and Mr. Abel, this is intended to follow that statute. Some people,
Yes, sir. It's Jeff.
yeah, some people would prefer declarations rather than being, quote, sworn. And I think that's the reason for the statute. So you're withdrawing it, and this is an individual attesting to some of her personal experiences. I think she's a teacher. and as she says, a lifelong Democrat. So I'm not sure the relevance of that, but she is a teacher and she talks about her, I would call this her experiences. So I'm going to admit that. Objection withdrawn. 21 CA 1382. Defendant's Exhibit 46 is admitted. And I also have a work copy here. So have we covered everything from both sides as far as exhibits?
I believe so.
All right. Okay, I think we're good on that. I would
From the
just,
defendants, yes.
okay, I would just recommend to both sides, if you all have something you're going to cross-examine somebody with and it's not an exhibit, it'd probably be a really good idea to make sure that the other lawyers have that document. So if they need to engage in a request for a completeness consideration, in other words, if you read part, you may or may not want to read another part. I would just request that since we're on, again, very shortened time scheduling, that we do our best efforts to make sure that the other side, and this goes to plaintiff, it goes to defendants, both sides, that we have the document. But I have to say, overall, I think the lawyers have done a really good job of working together, and we all are working under intense time pressures, and everybody has clients that are very interested in the case. So I understand that. So I think we're in good shape on exhibits. Anything else we need to bring up?
Not for plaintiffs, Your Honor.
None from the defendants, Your Honor.
Okay, so let's let me get my notebook open here. Let's go to the next witness from the plaintiff.
Judge, before we begin, can we invoke the rule again? Not that it needs to be, but just to remind everybody.
So is there anybody on the screen that I need to put in the waiting room or the breakout room?
Ms. Abravanel is a party to the case, but that is the second witness for today.
Is she one of your witnesses?
She is, yes.
She's a party and one of our witnesses, yes.
All right, so hold a second. Was that Mr. Sheridan that just talked?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, is she a party?
She is a party and a witness, so I don't think the rule.
I'm not aware that the rule of sequestration applies to parties.
It does not.
Defendants agree.
Okay. All right, so we're good. So who's our first witness today?
Dr. Mona Mangat.
Dr. Mangat. I see Dr. Mangat's here. Hold on a minute. Dr. Mangat, I'm assuming since you've been here, you figured out I'm the judge, so that's who I am. So I'm going to place you under oath if you'll raise your right hand. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sheridan, is this, are you handling the direct on this case?
I am, Your Honor.
On
Thank
this
you.
witness? Okay, you may proceed.
Doctor, please state your full name.
Dr. Mona Vishen Mangat.
Okay. And what is your area of practice?
I practice pediatric and adult allergy and immunology.
Could you please give us an overview of your education experience and any certifications that you hold that are relevant to your testimony here today?
Yes, I completed an accelerated 6-year BSMD program, which gave me a Bachelor of Science and a medical degree from Northeastern Ohio University's College of Medicine in 1996. I then completed a 4-year combined internal medicine and pediatrics residency at the University of Tennessee, Memphis, and Le Bonheur Children's Hospital. Completed that in 2000, and then I moved on to do an allergy immunology fellowship at Henry Ford Hospital, which I completed in 2003. I am board certified by the American Board of Allergy and Immunology, and I have been board certified by the American Board of Pediatrics and Internal Medicine.
And what does board certification entail?
It entails a maintenance of certification, so staying up to date on data and literature and passing a certification exam every several years.
So that we have a good record, can you please give a brief description on what an allergist is or what that entails?
Yeah, sure. I don't know if I can do it briefly, but let me
Well,
try.
as brief as you're able to.
It's a medical specialty that is one of the few that's double boarded. So meaning we see adults and children in our practice. And it is the study of the immune system and in all the ways in which it can misbehave. So if we think about the immune system kind of maybe as a seesaw, when the immune system is well balanced, it fights external stimulus or external factors that it deems to be harmful to the immune system. And so it keeps those things out of the body and it keeps track of, what should be inside the body. Now, clinical disease is seen in an allergic standpoint, from an allergic standpoint, when the immune system identifies things that are outside of it that are actually not harmful. So that's like, pollen and peanuts and things like that, then invoking an immune response that would lead to an allergic disease. The other part of the practice is the immunology standpoint. Primarily, we deal with immunodeficiencies. So these are scenarios in which the immune system is not able to properly fight off pathogens, leading to recurrent infections. So I think that summarizes it.
Thank you. Your practice, where is it located? You don't need to give a specific address, but just part of the state.
St. Petersburg.
Okay. And how long have you been in practice?
Since 2007 in solo private practice.
So this is a private practice that you work in. Do you treat patients with COVID?
I do.
Have you done so since March of 2020?
I have.
All right. And the ages of those patients?
I mean, in my practice, I see newborns to, cradle to grave. So there's no specific age.
All right. And have you noticed a difference in the volume of patients with COVID from fall of 2020 to fall of 2021?
I don't have specific data for my practice that I've pulled, but I do know that typically I will see a decrease in volume in the summer months leading up to cold and flu season, which I have not seen since March of 2020. It's been just consistently busy.
And are you familiar with what's being referred to as the Delta variant?
Yes.
And briefly, what's your understanding of the Delta variant?
My understanding of the Delta variant is that it is one of the variants that was originally identified in India in the end of 2020. It has now become the predominant variant here in the US and especially in Florida. And it appears that this variant of the virus is so successful primarily because it replicates faster and it infected people produce much more virus than they did with the other variants of the virus. So this means that it's much more contagious, which is evidenced by the R naught that I think we've discussed or you've discussed on this call before. And the viral load that patients carry is over 1,000 times greater than it was with the original variant of the virus.
And to your understanding, when did the Delta variant become the primary variant that we've dealt with in the state of Florida?
My understanding is July of this year.
Okay. Do you rely upon the CDC?
I rely upon the CDC, as do, I think, physicians all across the world.
Would you describe them as the premier authority on these issues?
Yes.
Do you know what the CDC recommends for schools?
Yes, they recommend, obviously, in-person school should be a priority and it should be safe. Anyone who's eligible for vaccine should be vaccinated. All students over the age of 2, educators, staff, visitors, all that sort of thing in schools should be masked. There should be at least 3 feet of distance between students in classrooms. And there should be other layered mitigating strategies like improved ventilation, screening, testing, hand washing, things like that.
Yesterday, Mr. Bean asked a lot of the doctors who testified about a CDC study that was done in May of this year. Are you familiar with that study?
Can you reference what number that is?
I don't remember what number it is in their exhibit. But
Give me a second and I'll find it.
48.
48.
48, yes. I do have that study in front of me.
Did you have an opportunity to review it?
I did.
Okay. Does the timeline of that study as it relates to Delta concern you at all?
Yes, because this data was collected in November and December of 2020 in Georgia.
Okay. Is the CDC allowed to evolve as far as their opinions and recommendations on prevention of the spread of COVID?
Not only are they allowed to, I would expect that they should, and they must do so as we are learning new data on a daily basis.
So if they've learned new information since the fall of 2020, they're not bound by what they said in the fall of 2020?
That would be true.
Okay. What is the AAP?
The American Academy of Pediatrics. This is the premier organization for pediatricians, and they have been advocating for children and providing guidance since, I think, the 1930s.
Okay. And do you rely on their recommendations as it relates to measures for prevention of contracting or the spread of COVID?
I do very much.
And what is their recommendation as it relates to masking in schools?
Everyone over the age of 2 that's in a school setting should be masked.
Do you know of any credible scientific or medical data that masking can cause harm to children?
I am not aware of any data that long-term harm can occur to children with masking.
That begs the question of short-term harm. Are you aware of any studies or data that support that?
I am aware, if you'll give me a moment to pull that. I'm aware of a study that shows, I believe that this was admitted, or maybe not yet, but
all exhibits have now been admitted. So anything that you're referring to.
I think it was exhibit 14. And
Okay.
this references a study from 2012 in the Journal of Cognition. And this showed that in children, especially toddlers, ages 1 to 3, they seem to be most impacted by masking, and impacted meaning they have a little bit more difficulty identifying emotions and understanding facial cues in that age group.
Okay. What's your opinion on that?
My opinion is that it is very important developmentally for children to be able to understand visual and auditory cues. I think that it's clear that this is most important in this younger age group, under the age of 3, toddlers. I think that the data supports that children older than age 3, all the way up into adolescence, are continuously able to obtain that information, and actually primarily seem to focus on visual cues and the eyes. And so those remain visible when children and adults are masked.
So do you feel that's an important distinction between 1 and 3-year-olds and school-age children as it relates to this case before the court?
I think
Since it deals with public schools?
I think it does. I think, we should be much more cautious with recommending masking for under the age of 3. And we should be much less concerned about long-term effects on development in older children.
Have you been keeping abreast of the numbers of children affected since the beginning of the school year this year?
I have been attempting to.
And what's your current understanding?
My current understanding is that Florida is second only to Mississippi in the number of hospitalized children. My understanding is that there are about 50 children per day that are getting admitted to the hospital in Florida for COVID. My understanding is that we've had at least 200 cases of MIS-C reported in Florida in children.
Is the CDC's recommendation a layering of measures between masking, distancing, and vaccination?
Yes, I would probably add ventilation to that.
All right. What do we know about children under the age of 12?
We know that they are ineligible for vaccines right now, and we know that there's probably over 1 million of those students in our public school system that are at risk of developing COVID because they don't have the luxury of having a vaccine.
And then with regard to them being in classrooms, their ability to socially distance?
Well, we know that that is unlikely to occur with everyone back in school. Probably in 2020, that was a much more feasible option as many families chose distance learning.
Which is is that available right now to your understanding?
To my understanding, it is not.
Okay. And then you added a layer as it relates, I think you said filtration. Was that what was?
Ventilation.
Ventilation. What's your understanding as it relates to ventilation in the public schools currently?
My understanding is that no great efforts have been made to improve the ventilation systems in schools. That would require a lot of upgrades and probably addition of HEPA filters to each classroom. And I know that that's not feasible. I also know that open air classrooms would be probably a better option, or those that had windows open, but we live in Florida, so that's not really feasible either.
So then what does that leave us?
That leaves us with vaccinating who we can and masking everybody.
Okay. Are you aware of the argument that COVID deaths or diagnosis of COVID have been misstated or overstated?
I am aware that there is concern with the veracity of the data that's being shared and the timeliness in which it's being shared, which I would interpret as likely underreporting of cases.
And why is that?
Because it appears that there has been a move to not share data in a timely fashion. So we no longer have daily reports. There's a lot of dumping of data on certain days, which seems to skew that 7-day averages. And I'm also aware that only 1/3 of school districts in Florida are openly sharing COVID data with the public.
Are you familiar with the phrase contact tracing?
I am.
Do you have an opinion as to how successful the counties have been in contact tracing?
I only have my own personal experience and anecdotes to support this. I'm aware that, especially in my own children's school and many schools locally, that there are cases of COVID or family members of students that have COVID, and no one is being notified in the classroom. So my assumption is that that contact tracing is not being done to the level that it should be done to stop the spread of COVID.
There was a chart used yesterday by the defense. I'm not sure if it was entered into evidence, but it was a comparison of counties for 2020 and 2021 for the effectiveness of using mask mandates. Are you familiar with what I'm referring to?
I am.
Did you have an,
Exhibit 18.
did you have an opportunity to review that?
I did briefly.
Do you have an opinion on that chart?
I think there are a lot of concerns about that chart because it's not clear exactly what was occurring in each of those counties when the data was collected. Were masks mandatory? What was the actual uptake of masking? What were the other layers of mitigation that were present in those schools at that time? And what was the community transmission rate at that time as well? All of these would factor into that information.
And that's
Are you
Appendix 18, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Are you familiar with the long-term effects of COVID on children under age 12?
I am aware of the literature. I myself have not cared for anybody with long-term complications like MIS-C, but those seem to be quite devastating in their effects on the neurologic system and the cardiac system. I have taken care of several adolescents who have had long-term COVID symptoms, what we would call long haulers. Primarily, these symptoms have fallen into the categories of shortness of breath on exertion, fatigue, and chronic cough. I've also been aware and cared for many patients who have been suffering with not being able to be in in-person school because of the risk to their attendance in in-person school. So this has been anxiety, depression, behavioral issues, all of these things that we see in children that are forced to quarantine or do remote learning because it's not safe to be in school.
Do you know of any medical association or society that does not endorse mask use indoors for schools currently?
I know of none.
Are you familiar with Dr. Jayanta Bhattacharya?
I have recently become familiar with him.
Have you read his declaration that was entered into evidence?
I didn't read the declaration. I read a summary of it.
Okay. And what's your opinion of the summary?
I think that we have to be careful how we look at the information that Dr. Bhattacharya is providing. He is hypothesizing many things that have not been shown to be true. And I think it's important to recognize that Dr. Bhattacharya is very well recognized in the medical economics sphere and works in aging and the economics of aging. And he is not an epidemiologist. He is not an infectious disease physician. He is not a pediatrician. He is not an immunologist. And in fact, he is not a practicing physician either. So I review his words with great caution.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Mr. Bean, would you like to cross?
Yes, I get to question the medical folks. So,
Okay, excellent.
with my limited education. So, Doctor, thank you for your time today. Doctor, is a nanometer smaller than a micrometer?
A nanometer is smaller than a micrometer. Micrometer is smaller than nanometer. Nanometer is smaller than micrometer. Yes, sorry. Yes.
That's okay. That was confusing yesterday.
Yeah.
Do you know how much smaller a nanometer is than a micrometer?
I don't know exactly off the top of my head, maybe 1,000 times.
That's correct.
Yeah.
You mentioned the rate of admission for COVID patients in Florida, second only to Mississippi, or in the same category as Mississippi. What study are you relying on to make that statement?
I'll have to get that information for you, but I'm pretty sure it's CDC data that's been released.
And then you mentioned the Delta variant started in India. Is that correct? Or at least the study seemed to indicate that?
It was first identified in India.
Okay. And then are you familiar with its transfer over to the United Kingdom?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you just have to answer verbally. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, yes.
No, it's okay. Are you familiar that the hospital admissions for the Delta variant in the United Kingdom have decreased?
I am not aware of United Kingdom data. Specifics.
You mentioned, with respect to human beings 3 and under, that visual cues are important, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
a yes.
Sorry.
I know, it's fine.
Okay.
And you're saying that they're lesser importance as the human ages, is that correct?
Correct.
But are they still important?
Yes, they're still important.
You mentioned Dr. Bhattacharya, and you read a summary. Did you prepare that summary?
No,
Who prepared that summary?
I read it online.
Okay. Do you know where you read it online?
I will have to get that information for you. I think I do have it printed somewhere.
Okay. And you say that Dr. Bhattacharya hypothesizes some things that are not true. Do you know specifically what you were referring to?
I was referring to the idea that herd immunity is the way to get, natural herd immunity is the way to get out of this pandemic. I think that it doesn't take into account the human toll and the loss of life and the morbidity and mortality that will result from the millions and millions of infections that must occur to reach that level of herd immunity. And it doesn't take into account the variables related to the Delta variant.
Are you familiar with Dr. Unash from the University of South Florida?
I am.
Are you familiar with his comments about herd immunity?
I'm not.
Doctor, have you conducted personally, I know you have a busy practice, but have you conducted any scientific studies on the efficacy of mask wearing by students in the classroom?
No.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Doctor, of the increase in patient admission in the state of Florida, are you able to testify with certainty that those patients are coming from school districts and counties where there is no mask mandate?
I cannot.
So you can't link the increase in admissions to mask mandate or non-mask mandate school board policies, correct?
Correct.
Dr. Unash testified that he thought the COVID virus we would be done with the COVID virus in October of 2021. Are you able to confirm that good news for us?
No, I'm
I would
not.
object to the form of the question. That was not entirely what he predicted, or at least it's the time frame that prediction was made. I think would be important to ask the doctor.
Okay, well, overruled. She's answered. What's our next question?
I was hoping she could confirm the good news.
Well, you can.
Yes, sir. Hold on one second. I think I'm done. Doctor, with cloth mask, how effective do you believe those to be on a scale of 0 to 100%?
90%. And that's just a number I'm throwing out. I am familiar with some data, though, that I could share with you.
Okay. You could share it with us. What would be that data?
I think it was Exhibit 15, which is a study in Mayo Clinic proceedings this summer. It was a lab study that tried to identify the reduction in transmission of aerosolized particles from the source to the target. And it showed that with 3 feet of separation, there was 84% reduction in aerosolized particles that reached the target. With 6 feet, it was 97%. And without any social distancing and without any regard to the type of mask, being N95, cloth mask, or surgical mask, there was a 99% reduction in aerosolized particles that reached the target.
So I'm sorry, go ahead. Were you finished?
So I feel strongly that masking of any sort that you can get your hands on is better than not masking. Significantly better.
No, I understand that. It's also important of how the mask is worn, correct?
Exactly. It's
Okay.
very important that it have a
And so
tight.
that it be tight. And the size of the particle is smaller than a nanometer?
So the COVID particle is anywhere from 50 to 150 nanometers. An N95 mask will keep out 95% of particles that are under 300 nanometers. Respiratory droplets are much larger. Those are in the micrometers, 5 to 10 micrometers. And so we are not only keeping large particles out, we're probably doing a pretty good job on small particles as well.
Could you give the court an example of when you say the nanometer size for that particle? Is there anything to compare that to?
I mean, I guess you could compare it to like a dust mite, because I'm an allergist, so I look at those a lot. The virus is smaller than a dust mite, and a larger particle, when we talk about these respiratory droplets, is like, 1 when someone speaks and you see spit coming out of their mouth, that's what we're talking about.
So the primary purpose of the mask is to protect the person that's wearing it, correct?
It is to protect the person that's wearing it as well as the person that is, both sides are being protected.
But is the primary purpose to protect the person that's wearing it?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no, that's not, no. Let me rephrase that.
Sure.
It keeps me from sharing my germs with you, and it keeps you from sharing your germs with me. And so regardless of whether I'm vaccinated or not, and you're vaccinated or not, it's protecting both of us.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
So, doctor, I have one question. If there's someone in a student in a classroom and they're COVID positive, is that the most important person in the room that should be wearing a mask?
No, that's not the most important. They're probably equally important are the people that are vulnerable in that class who have not been vaccinated and who have high risk diseases that would make them, more susceptible to having a bad outcome should they become infected with COVID.
Is that the thought process or the logic that appears to be behind the recommendation for universal masking in schools by the CDC?
Yes, and I think it's also important to recognize that we now know with the Delta variant that even those that are vaccinated, when they become infected, while they may have very minimal symptoms, they can still carry a large amount of virus in their nasopharynx, and they can then shed that virus and share that virus. So just because they're vaccinated does not mean that they're not carrying virus anymore.
Okay, thank you. Does that raise any issues or questions anyone else would like to ask?
No, Your Honor.
From the defendant, Your Honor.
Okay. Doctor, thank you for your time. I know you're busy and probably have lots of things to do. So you're released from being a witness. You're certainly entitled to watch the proceedings on YouTube if you would like to do that. Second Circuit of Florida is the website to get it to, and there's a button that says YouTube on there. And you're also free not to watch it. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Have a
Okay.
nice day.
Okay, bye-bye. So can we, does anyone need a break? We've been going approximately an hour. Let me ask the court reporter. Are you good? Everybody good?
Your Honor, I wouldn't mind a 10-minute break if you don't mind. If
Let's
that's
do it.
possible.
No problem.
Thank you, Your
Let's break until a quarter till 11. All right.
Have a good day. What are you doing today? It's eggs.
Okay. Who's our next witness?
Yes, Your Honor, Aaron Barnett for the plaintiffs. It would be Leslie Abravanel.
Ms. Abravanel, I'm the judge, so I'm going to place you under oath if you'll raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may inquire.
Good morning. Can you state your name for the record?
Yes, Leslie Abravanel.
And Ms. Abravanel, in which city and county do you live in the state of Florida?
I am in Boca Raton, which is in Palm Beach County.
And do you have school-aged children?
I do. I have 10-year-old twins in 5th grade.
Do they attend public school?
They do.
an elementary school in Boca Raton.
Correct.
Do your children in their school have a dress code or school uniforms?
Yes, they have a dress code.
Which would be what? What
They
is
have to wear
specified in the dress
a
code?
polo shirt and a certain length of a skirt or shorts. They can't wear anything they really want to wear, frankly.
And is this the locally residentially school zone for your residents?
Yes,
Is it a
Yeah.
good school?
it's an excellent school. We actually moved here for this school, yes.
Now, since the pandemic began, did your children attend school in brick and mortar schools or virtually?
No, they did distant learning. They were virtual for a year and a half.
And that virtual option, was that Florida virtual school or was that the distance learning special option during the pandemic?
It was the distance learning special option. So they actually got to take their classes from their teacher who was teaching live from the school.
And from when to when did they do the distance learning option?
And as soon as the pandemic hit in March 2020, they finished third grade, and then they did the entire fourth grade from distant learning.
During, is the distance learning option available to your children this school year?
No, it is not.
Now, have your children attended school in person this school year?
They have, yes.
Can you tell the court of your experience thus far with your in-person learning for your children?
It's been a hot mess. My children started, they missed the first week of school because they were away in sleepaway camp. So they started the second week of school. So that would have been August 16th, I believe, was a Monday. Both children attended, my daughter and my son. My son came home and had the sniffles and missed the entire last week of school. So he missed the whole week. My daughter went from Monday through Thursday and then was home on Friday because she felt not so hot.
Now, your son, did he have a COVID test?
He did have a COVID test. We gave him one at home, and then we went to the pediatrician on Tuesday morning, and we waited 4 days for the results. So while we waited, he was home.
Did the pediatrician advise whether or not you needed to quarantine your child?
She did. She said, keep him home until we get a negative test back. And she definitely said that they were inundated and it would take longer than the typical 48 hours, which it did. We got the results Friday night.
Did you notify the school that your child had a pending COVID test?
I did, right away.
Did the school system require a child to quarantine?
No, they didn't say anything. I was just doing it because I would never send a child in sick to begin with, but obviously now I definitely wouldn't. But they never said a word. I just said he will be home until we receive the negative test.
Can we put Dr. Hunte in the waiting room, please?
All right, let me, hold on a second. This might take a minute. Breakout room. Put in waiting room, right?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Gives me a chance to work the controls on the computer here. Okay, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I think you said this, but your son's COVID test came back negative on Friday.
Yes.
Now, previously, have you been involved with your children's school?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Whether it was the PTA or volunteering at the lunchroom or going into the classrooms to help out or to show up during certain presentations, 100%.
And since the pandemic started and specifically this school year, have you been in the school at all?
Oh, no, not at all since school started. I just went to the open house prior to school opening to meet both teachers, actually 4 teachers.
Can you tell the court about your experience at the open house?
Sure. So we received an email from the school or the school district the day before the meet the teacher, and it said all visitors to campus, including children, because usually the children go to meet their teachers, mine couldn't, but all visitors, including children and adults, must wear masks to the Meet the Teacher, as well as all staff had to be masked as well. So it was fantastic. Everyone had masks on that day only.
Now, when you went to your children's classroom, were you surprised at the setup of the desks?
Oh, I was horrified. I was under the impression that the desks were going to be apart. They were clusters of 4 desks to make one table. So 4 children would be sitting at one table of 4 different desks.
And in that setup, would the children at those 4 tops be able to socially distance?
I mean, no, how could they? There was no way. They were literally on top of each other. No.
Were there any sort of barriers, or I think we've seen plexiglass between the desks? Any
No.
of that exist?
I'm sorry. No, I wish there was. No, there was nothing.
And was that different from the school setup last year?
To be honest, I don't know because my children were home, but my son had told me that last year the desks were separated, and in 5th grade he would have his own desk, but not the case when I went to the Meet the Teacher.
Why did you bring this lawsuit?
Because we're throwing our children into pretty much a petri dish right now. If not everyone is required to wear a mask, how are we going to protect children and staff from catching this Delta variant? We are not. I'm terrified, and so is every other parent I've spoken with. I mean, it makes no sense to me that parents comply with, say, peanut allergies children have. There are peanut-free rooms. So my children love peanut butter, but if they're in a room where there's a child who cannot have peanut butter, no one has peanut butter. And you know what? That's fine. We want to protect all the kids. So we comply. It's fine. This is not the case with a pandemic.
Have your children been vaccinated?
No, I wish they were. They're under 12, so they're not eligible.
And will you vaccinate them once they're eligible?
Oh, yes, 100%.
When you were at the Meet the Teacher and open house, did you witness any mitigation efforts on behalf of the school to stop or slow the spread of COVID?
No, I saw nothing. And I don't know what a HEPA filter looks like, but I don't believe they have those. There were no plexiglass. There were no separations of desks. I saw hand sanitizer, which is fantastic. But beyond that, no, I saw nothing.
Did you feel safe on campus?
Yes, because I was wearing a mask and everyone else was that day.
Do you feel that your children are safe?
I'm very nervous. I'm sorry. I'm very, very nervous. They know to wear masks. They will be wearing masks. They know they've worn masks for 1.5 years. So I know that they're aware and they're smart enough to do that. But I'm afraid of the kid who's not wearing the mask, who's next to my kid, who might somehow spread it, through when they're in the cafeteria, where they're eating. I'm nervous, 100%.
This school year, what interaction have you had besides the Meet the Teacher on campus?
None. I just drive to the pickup and the drop off. There's no interaction.
During your pickup and drop off, and I think you're talking about what parents know as the car line, is that correct?
Yes.
During car line, do you see other children or staff, and are they masked?
Most of the staff are masked, but because they're outside, I've seen a few without masks. And thank God, most of the children I have seen were wearing masks, with the exception of a few who either took them off because it was outside or I don't know. But I'm under the impression I received data that out of approximately 1,100 students in my children's school, 98 opted out when they were able to from wearing masks. So a tiny minority have opted out of wearing masks.
Now, the 1,100 children in the school, is this a grade K through 5th grade?
Yes.
And what is the age range of the children in your school, in your children's school?
I would say probably 5 to 11.
And so it's safe to assume that none of the children in the school are eligible to be vaccinated.
Correct. Yes.
Do you believe masking in school is a parent choice issue?
No, I don't. It's
Why
a
not?
It's a public health issue. So if our children have to receive 6 vaccines to go to public school in Florida, which they do, then masks that prevent a deadly pandemic or curb the spread at least should be as well mandated based on that same logic.
Do your children wear masks when they're in school?
Yes, all day.
Do they wear masks when they're outside of your home?
Yes, I make them wear masks because children come in contact with each other, sometimes on top of each other. When they're playing, they're kids. So yes, I do make them wear masks everywhere, now especially.
Now, was there a time period since the beginning of the pandemic when you didn't require your children to wear masks outside of the home?
No, never. The only time they did not wear masks were when they were in summer camp for 2 months, in which everyone was staff were vaccinated. All children had to quarantine before they got into camp, and they were in a bubble for about 7 weeks where no one from the outside was coming in. So for 2 months, they did not wear masks.
Was that, did the summer camp occur before the Delta variant was out?
Fortunately, yes, we would have never sent them otherwise. And when we picked the children up at camp, they said, we thought COVID was over. And we said, so did we, but it's not.
Now, have your children developed any health issues as a result of wearing masks?
No, none.
How about
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No,
go
in
ahead.
fact, they've had less colds, less sore throats. It's been fantastic.
What about mental health issues? Have they developed any negative mental health issues as a result of wearing a mask?
No, not at all. None.
Any mental health issues from fear of getting sick in school?
Yes, my son is an anxious child. And since COVID started in March 2020, he started seeing a therapist virtually because he is terrified of getting sick.
Why do your children wear masks?
They wear masks so they don't get sick, and they wear masks so they don't get anyone else sick.
Obviously your children I assume, have a pediatrician.
Yes.
And did you discuss or seek guidance from your pediatrician about mask wearing for your children?
No, I never sought guidance. However, right before school started, the practice sent out a mass email to parents saying that this practice goes with the CDC and the Academy of Pediatrics, and they will require masking of all children in schools. They recommend it.
Have you taken either of your children to an in-person doctor's visit in the past year?
Yes.
Does your pediatrician require all people entering the office wear a mask?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
And I think you said this, but I'm not positive. Are you familiar with the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendation for maskings in school?
Yes, very, very familiar. Yes.
And are you following those recommendations for your children?
Of course.
Ms. Abravanel, what particularized harm will you suffer if your child's school doesn't have the right to enact mandatory masking under the current executive order?
Objection, calls for speculation.
Overruled.
You can answer.
Okay. Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. What particularized harm will you suffer if your child's school does not have the right to enact mandatory masking under the current executive order?
Well, it's not so much what I will suffer. I will be a nervous wreck. I'm a nervous parent. Most of us are, but it's the fear that our children might absolutely get sick. Instead of worrying about them doing well in school, or God forbid, a school shooter, now we have to worry about them catching a deadly pandemic. I've protected them for 1.5 years. And now to send them into this, and for parents to have to face that decision of, do we keep them home? Do we send them in? This is horrendous, and it's so preventable. So it's not what harm I will suffer, it's what harm our children will suffer. And that by proxy is the harm that I will suffer.
Now, specifically, is online learning an option for your family?
Right now, there is something called Florida Virtual, which had a long waiting list, which I looked into. I spoke with the director. It's not for us. after a year and a half of virtual school, my children do need to be in brick and mortar. So the only option to my knowledge right now was Florida virtual, which that's it. No in-class, no direct lessons from their school like last year.
Why do you believe that the local school board should be able to determine what's best for your school?
Because they are here to ensure our children to have a safe school environment following the Florida Constitution. They are elected to work for us to make sure we get the best education for our children, the safest education, the best circumstances. So it's the school board. If it's not the school board, then who's in charge of the school?
That was my last question. I tender the witness to the defense.
All right, Mr. Bean, are you handling the cross? Okay.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. Ma'am, Palm Beach County is currently under a mandatory mask mandate, correct?
Yes, it just happened on Monday.
Okay. And your school board entered that mandate, correct?
They did.
When you described a situation when your son came home from camp with the sniffles, or he went to school and then came home with the sniffles, and you had him tested for COVID, correct?
Yes.
Is that what you testified to?
Correct.
Ma'am, you made that decision that your son was going to receive that medical test, correct?
100%, yes.
Would you want anyone else to make that decision other than you, ma'am, that your son would take a medical test?
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
You would let someone else other than you make that decision?
Well, along with my input, absolutely. If the school said your son needs to take a COVID test, I 100% would agree with them, even if I wasn't thinking to do it. Yes.
And if you didn't agree with them, what would happen? Would you allow your son to be tested over your objection?
Probably with issue, yes. If it involves health, absolutely.
Ma'am, does anyone know your son better than you?
Yeah, my husband, maybe.
Fair enough. Ma'am, you seem very informed, and that's a great trait for citizens to have. You're familiar with the governor's executive order that you sued under this case?
Yes.
Okay. Does the governor's executive order preclude barriers being put up in the schoolroom?
Well, yes. If a mask is a barrier, yes, it does.
The plastic barriers for desks?
Oh, plexiglass, you mean?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't believe so, but my school doesn't have one, so I don't, I'm not sure.
But the executive order doesn't prohibit it, right?
To my knowledge, I actually don't know. I'm just talking about masks right now, not plexiglass.
No, I understand, but there are other methods to limit the transmission, right?
Right.
Does the executive order say you cannot have social distancing?
No, but the school said to the extent possible in a letter that we received. So they're doing their best, I guess. But my main concern are the masks.
Yes, ma'am. May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Certainly.
Ma'am, I have no further questions. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms.
Abravanel.
Abravanel. I appreciate you being here. You released as a witness, but you can now, if you wish to do so, watch the rest of the proceeding on YouTube.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And let's see, is our next witness in the breakout room?
Yes, please. Plaintiff calls Dr. Grace Hunte.
Hold on, just give me a second. I have to hit the right. Okay, yes. Dr. Hunte should be coming in now. She'll be There she is. Okay, Dr. Hunte, I'm Judge Cooper, and I'm going to place you under oath. So if you'll raise your right hand, I'll place you under oath. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. You may proceed. Is this Mr. Gallagher?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you may proceed.
Good morning, Doctor. If you could please provide the court with a brief outline of your training, your credentials and background, that would be most helpful.
I did my undergraduate schooling at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. I did my medical school there too. I also got a master's in public health at Emory University. Then I went on to my residency program at the University of Colorado in Denver. And then I've been practicing since I graduated from there.
And you're currently a licensed physician?
Yes, sir.
In what state?
It's Florida.
And how long have you been a licensed physician for?
7 years.
What kind of setting do you practice in?
I practice at a community hospital. I cover their pediatric unit and also do consultations in the emergency department. And then sometimes I go up to the children's hospital and serve as a hospitalist there too.
What are your specific areas of practice?
General pediatrics in the hospital settings. So I care for children from 0 to 21 years of age.
Do you treat patients with COVID in your practice?
Yes, sir.
When did you first start treating patients with COVID?
Last year, March 2020.
What are you seeing in terms of volume with your current COVID patient practice?
We've certainly seen an increase this year compared to last year. This year, I probably have 1 to 2 COVID patients a week, whereas last year I only had maybe 1 a month.
And is that in the community hospital setting?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And are you seeing an increase in school-aged children presenting with COVID?
Yes, sir.
Can you talk about the age range of children that you treat for COVID? Like what's the youngest and what's the span on how old they top out at?
So probably the youngest this past week, I had a mother who gave birth to a child who had COVID. So that baby was like 0 and then a couple days old. And then I've taken care of a baby that's been 7 days old who had gone home and had to come back into the hospital because he had a fever with COVID. I've taken care of a couple of 3-month-old babies, some like 9-month-old babies. We've had some a little bit older, 12 years old, 15, 17 years old.
And when you have someone that's just a newborn, what's the term for that? Is that day of life? They call it day of life 1?
Day of life, yeah, day of life 0 when they're first born, and then day of life 1 and 2 and 3 subsequently.
So you've had patients that have had COVID at day of life 1?
Yes.
And with regard to those children that were newborns or in the day of life range or in the 1 month range, did they have any other comorbidities or other health issues?
No.
So they were otherwise healthy when born?
Yes.
Except for the COVID?
Yeah.
Any kind of unique issues or unique health concerns resulting from the COVID, aside from just the COVID infections?
We've seen some unexpected complications. We just last week, we had a 17-year-old boy who also had acute pancreatitis with it. We've had younger children that my colleagues have taken care of at the Children's Hospital who've developed leukemia with their COVID. And then we've had teenagers who've had cardiac arrhythmias with it, or heart murmurs, or heart, yeah.
Sure. With regard to children that are under 12, do they have any greater risk of contracting COVID?
Yes, because they don't have the protection of the vaccine.
Are you familiar with the CDC recommendations for COVID masking in schools?
Yes.
And generally, what are those recommendations?
They recommend universal masking in schools regardless of vaccination status.
And do you agree with that recommendation?
Yes.
And same question with regard to the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations. What are those recommendations relative to masking in schools?
They also recommend universal masking. They feel like it's important for kids to go back to school in person, and that the risk of going back to school in person can be mitigated by following the CDC and WHO guidelines to help protect them while in school.
Would you say that part of your practice you would keep up on journals and current medical literature?
Yes.
And specific to the COVID area?
Yes.
Do you know of any scholarly articles or peer-reviewed articles or any kind of literature generally that does not endorse the mandatory masking in a school setting?
No, I don't know of any reputable peer-reviewed journal that is endorsing not masking in school.
In your opinion, is a mask a medical decision or is it a public health measure?
It's a public health measure.
If you have children in schools, will they wear masks?
Yes, I currently have a child in kindergarten and one in second grade, and they both wear masks to school.
And when you're home with them after school, do you engage with them without the masks being on?
Yes, when we're at home, inside our home, but when we go out, we wear masks.
We'll tender the witness to defense counsel.
Mr. Bean, I suppose. Okay, you may proceed.
Doctor, thank you for what you do for our community. We have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bean. Doctor, thank you for appearing. You're released from being a witness. You, of course, are free to go about your business treating patients, or if you have some time, you're welcome to watch this on YouTube. So,
okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for appearing.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, so it's 11. Do we have another witness?
Yes, we are trying to.
Yes, Your Honor. We're just trying to get Dr. Christman the Zoom link. I've got it for him right here. Hopefully he'll pop in right now.
Okay, about how long will this witness be?
Well, I know we used up some time this morning going through exhibits, but I'm going to do my best to meet the noon deadline.
All right. All right, just want to try to get everybody. I want to find if we can complete it before noon, so we won't have, I just don't want to go long past the lunch hour for lots of reasons. Some of us don't eat lunch. Some of us are required to eat lunch for various medical reasons. So I'm not going to inquire, but I just don't like to work through lunch. Plus,
I will keep an eye on the shot clock and try and get done by then.
Court reporter needs breaks too. Is the court reporter okay? Do you need a break? Okay. Anyone else? Okay.
I heard a bell, which I'm hoping was Dr. Christman.
Dr. Christman is on, and Dr. Is it Christman? Is that right?
Sorry, I can't see who's addressing me. But whoever it is, it's
I'm the guy
Tony
right up at the
Kreisman.
top of my screen, at least.
Okay, Tony Kreisman.
Oh, my, Dr. Christman. Okay. Dr. Christman, I'm the judge. And
Good morning, sir.
good morning. And I'm the one raising his hand. So if you'll raise your hand, I'll place you under oath. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right, Mr.
Sheridan.
Sheridan. Okay.
Doctor, can you state your full name for me?
Sure, Tony Kreisman.
All right. And Dr. Christman, I'm going to do my best to finish with enough time for opposing counsel to cross before the noon hour. So I'm going to go a little bit quickly, if that's okay.
Certainly.
Okay. What is your area of practice?
I'm a pediatric pulmonologist.
All right. And are you board certified in pediatric pulmonology?
I'm board certified in general pediatrics and pediatric pulmonology.
What does being board certified in both of those respects entail?
Passing certifying examinations set up by the national bodies that administer them.
Can you give a brief explanation or overview of your education experience and any certifications that you hold that are relevant to your testimony here today?
I'm a medical doctor, graduated in Johannesburg, South Africa, many eons ago. I did an internship in South Florida, in Tampa, a residency there, a fellowship, which is a specialization in pediatric pulmonology in New Orleans at Tulane, returned to the Tampa area, rejoined USF, and have been with my current employer for 31 years.
What are your responsibilities with your current employer?
I see pediatric patients from 0 to age 18, sometimes a little older, with a range of lung disease.
Briefly explain for the court what a pulmonologist does.
Pediatric pulmonologist takes care of children with a range of lung disease, such as asthma, cystic fibrosis, infant lung disease, and a host of others.
Are you familiar with the process by which a person becomes infected with COVID?
Yes.
Can you explain?
Very similar to any other respiratory acquired virus. They inhale a load of viral particles from aerosols or droplets generated by another infected person. The virus attaches to receptors on their mucosa, the lining of their airways, and then replicates and multiplies.
When talking about the efficacy of masks, is it relevant the size of the COVID particle versus the size of the droplet through which the COVID particle travels?
There's two issues here. One is source and one is recipient. And by that, I mean, the first is the infected person who may be coughing out particles. Those are relatively large. They're not just viruses. They're encased in mucus, saliva, what have you. So those are fairly large particles, which could be adequately trapped by virtually any sort of approved mask. An unmasked person coughing all of that out would then spray these droplets across a room, across a distance, and the droplets would fall to the ground and maybe contaminate a surface, but the particles can become aerosolized, which means they can be suspended in the air and then inhaled. So there's many, many studies showing which masks are effective and which are not. That sort of ranges from, please don't wear the gaiter that you use to keep your neck from getting sunburned as an effective filter for incoming particles. It might slow down a little bit the outgoing stuff that you might cough out. Importance of all of that, please wear a mask, whether you're the unknown infected person or the person trying to protect yourself from infection, because the data supports doing that.
Are you familiar with CDC protocols regarding prevention of spread of COVID?
I am.
And would you characterize them as layered, meaning there's a number of precautions that they're suggesting being taken?
Exactly. Masks are one element.
What are some of the other elements?
Distancing, hand washing, ventilation, air exchange, getting vaccinated.
With children under the age of 12, are they able to get vaccinated?
Not as yet.
And with schools not allowing a virtual or remote component to learn, them being in the same classroom, how does that impact the ability to distance?
Makes it very difficult.
Okay. Are you familiar with how successful the public schools have been in filtration or ventilation in their AC systems?
I'm not familiar with that. I know that some have attempted it. I know that that will be a little bit more difficult as the hot weather continues.
So would it be your opinion that masking is the most uniform protocol that can be taken throughout the schools for our children?
I think it's probably one of the more important ones.
Okay. Are you familiar with the AAP?
American Academy of Pediatrics, yes.
And do you follow their recommendations?
Yes.
What are their recommendations as far as masking in school?
Very similar. Mask, social distance, ventilate if possible, hand washing.
Do you know of any credible scientific or medical data that masking can cause harm to children?
No.
What's your understanding as far as the volume of those infected in fall of 20 versus fall of 21?
The volume has changed dramatically, especially in our state. The Delta variant, as you know, became the prevalent variant sometime early in July. The change in that prevalence was reflected by admission rates and positive test rates at the hospital where I work. From a very low number, under 20 in July for the whole month, they multiplied by a factor of 15. I beg your pardon, in June was the low number. They multiplied by a factor of 15 for July, and we're still gathering data for August, which is continuing to exceed that rate of change.
Are you familiar with the Delta variant?
Yes,
To your knowledge, when did that become a primary concern in the state of Florida?
sometime around the beginning of July.
Okay. Would any of the CDC researches or studies done prior to the Delta variant coming about in July have the same gravity as those conducted after that fact?
The gravity of the studies should now be multiplied because it's well known that Delta is significantly more contagious. It's been allied to chickenpox in terms of how contagious it can be.
Do you have any opinions regarding the assertion that COVID deaths or COVID diagnoses have been misreported or overreported?
I have heard that stated. The current number of deaths in the United States is stated by multiple authorities as just higher than 630,000 people. If you annualize that, that's about 400 deaths per year. If you compare that to the flu, in a bad year, we may have 80,000 deaths. So that's a factor of 5. If you then say that the number of deaths has been misrepresented, I don't know how it could have been misrepresented by a factor of 5. You have to dilute down the COVID deaths by a factor of 5 to even approach flu deaths. So I don't give much credence to those reports.
Do you feel that mask wearing in schools would result in a worse, the same, or better outcome as far as the spread of COVID?
Hard to see how it would make it worse. The two big options which are being debated then, would it stay the same or would it get better? There's a lot of literature stating that it would get better. There's certainly some literature saying it wouldn't make much difference. The MMWR report from Georgia suggested that mask use, ventilation use were all layers and that they would each have an significant impact on decreasing spread.
Do you have any concerns regarding a potential economic impact of not having mask mandates in schools?
As a pediatrician, what comes to mind is the barrage of phone calls that we've been getting from parents who are scared and who are reporting to us that their children who are unvaccinated because of age now have COVID, and what should they do? Their economic fears are compounded by the fact that one parent possibly has to then take off work. Even if the child isn't ill, they have to quarantine with the child or stay home with the child. If we had better prevention for children who can't be vaccinated, I imagine, this is just my opinion, that the economic impact to these parents would be significant in that they would not have to miss work.
Do you know of any medical association or society that does not endorse mask use for indoor schools currently?
I don't.
Do you feel that mask use is a healthcare decision, a public health decision? Do you have any opinion as to whether or not it's a medical device?
It's a public health decision in that none of us is an island. We have all these children under 12 years old that need protection from all of us that can be vaccinated. It's a medical decision in that there's good data showing that it works. And it's coming back to a public health decision. We've been there with polio, we've been there with smallpox, we've been there with diphtheria. We've immunized vast quantities of children to the point that these diseases no longer exist, and we have difficulty teaching our residents about them. I don't see why we can't do the same in a multi-layered approach to taking care of the current virus.
And who do masks protect in a classroom setting?
Well, we come back to source versus recipient. The children can cough out virus, even though there's certainly studies that show that they're not as contagious to adults. I don't know how relevant that is to Delta with the more contagious variant now upon us. They can certainly help protect their teachers who may or may not be vaccinated or who may or may not be immunocompromised. And they can protect their fellows from getting the virus, acquiring it, not necessarily being symptomatic, but going out into the community or their parents and infecting them.
Thank you, Doctor. I have no further questions. I tender the witness.
Thank you.
Spain.
Thank you. Doctor, has COVID-19 virus been scientifically studied as much as polio?
Clearly not.
Would you agree that the science around COVID-19 continues to evolve?
Absolutely. That's why the recommendations continue to evolve.
Doctor, have you personally conducted any type of scientific study on the efficacy of mask wearing by students in the classroom?
No, I have not.
Okay. Doctor, in your declaration, do you remember the declaration you signed for this case?
I do.
And by the way, doctor, you work at the Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, correct?
I do work there, but I'm appearing solely in my own capacity.
I didn't mean to infer that. Your contemporaries, is Dr. Dumois a contemporary?
Correct.
And Dr. Quigley?
Correct.
Okay. Do you know Dr. Unash?
I do not.
In your declaration, doctor, you cite to a New York Times opinion article. Do you recall that article?
I do.
Okay. And that involved a North Carolina school study, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you recall whether in that study they had a control group of students that did not wear a mask?
They alluded to that in the study, I believe, and that they did not have a significant control.
Right. So they had to look to other states. Is that correct?
That is correct. I can actually, I'm sure you have the article in front of you. I can bring it up as well so that I can refresh exactly what they said.
Sure. For time purposes, I'll just read the paragraph.
Sure, go ahead.
The sentence that I'm referring
Which
to.
exhibit are we looking at?
I don't know that it's an exhibit, Your Honor. It's a declaration.
Plaintiffs
He cites
two, I
to
believe.
New York-
Declaration. Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Gallagher, I'm
I
sorry.
believe plaintiffs two, probably.
Thank you.
Plaintiffs 2, hold on.
Your Honor, for time purposes, I think it's just one question, one sentence, but I think the
Okay.
doctor knows. Thank you.
All
So
right.
the sentence says, because North Carolina had a mask mandate for all K through 12 schools, we could not compare masked schools to unmasked schools. Do you recall that?
That's correct. Did you want to quote the other sentence from that study, though?
Well, there's a lot and it's already in evidence.
Okay.
But if, it's in evidence. I just wanted the control group is important for a scientific study though, right?
That is correct. They do reference other situations where they did make comparisons, but not to the numbers that they generated from the North Carolina study.
Right. And we don't know what the ventilation is for all those different school sites, correct, in North Carolina?
Absolutely not.
We don't know about the ages that they were testing, right?
We know that simply the grades that they were attending.
Yes, sir. Have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Doctor, thank you for what you do for our community. The defendants have no further questions.
Can you redirect?
Dr. Christman, was there another sentence from that report you wanted to reference?
I could reference that they state that data from their research and other studies in 3 other states that school transmission rates were lower when schools enforced mask mandates. They also quote data from Israel stating something similar. And I believe, Mr. Bean, you introduced the MMWR report from Georgia, which was November through December last year, which stated that multi-layered approach to viral prevention in our schools was important and that layering should include adequate ventilation and masking. They stressed that both of those were important.
Thank you, Doctor. No further questions.
Thank you.
All right.
Your Honor, since he brought that up, I didn't bring it up, but may I, since he brought
He
it up?
asked to quote and you wouldn't let him. So is this a proper recross?
Your Honor, he brought up the Georgia study of the CDC.
Okay, go. You can ask him a question. Go ahead.
Did the CDC report of May 21 that studied the Georgia schools, doctor, not say that there was no appreciable difference between those students that wore masks and those students that were unmasked?
It said that, and then it said that there was a difference with ventilation and there was a difference with masking. Its ultimate conclusion was that they were both very effective measures that should be introduced in a layered fashion.
But ultimately, it comes down to the parent's choice in this state, correct? Does the parent control the healthcare decisions for their child in this state?
Sir,
Actually, the form of the question as a healthcare decision, I think he testified it wasn't a healthcare decision. It's a public health decision.
Do you have an objection?
Form.
Are you asking me, Your Honor, or the counsel?
Counsel, do you have an objection or not?
Yes, to form.
Okay, what's the form that's incorrect?
He didn't establish a predicate. He's qualifying as it a healthcare decision. The doctor testified it wasn't a healthcare decision.
And I'm just simply testing that.
I'm sorry, I thought he was asking for a legal opinion, but overruled, there's no objection as to legal. There's no such objection available, pending, so overruled. He can answer if he can.
Would you mind just restating the question briefly, please?
Sure. Yeah, the question was, under the state statute, isn't the healthcare decision up to the parent for their minor child, assuming that it's within the law?
If I may, I think that's a philosophical question as well as a legal question. The impact of one's parent decision for their child is not only upon that child, it is on the greater community. It's upon their immunosuppressed teacher, upon their immunosuppressed colleagues. If this were a non-contagious disorder like tetanus, then you could say to a parent, you're free not to get a tetanus shot for your child. But the parent's decision doesn't only have an impact on their own child, it's a global decision. It has an impact on society.
So how much of one's individual liberty is society willing to interfere with, right?
Sir, I believe we could debate that for a long, long time.
Right. And I don't think we have time, but that's, thank you, doctor. You've been very kind.
Doctor, thank you for appearing, and you're relieved from any further necessity to be available to testify. But if you wish, you can watch this on YouTube. You're able to watch the proceeding now if you wish. If not, you may go about your business as you choose. But thank you for appearing.
You're very welcome, Your Honor, and thank you. I'm going to go and see a few patients.
Okay, that's probably better than watching me on YouTube.
Some days might be debatable.
Okay, all right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Counsel, do we have another witness, or should we break for lunch at this time?
I think breaking is probably the best idea. We don't have another witness now.
Okay, why don't we come back at a quarter? This is where math always gets in my way. In 1 hour, as I understand, that's a quarter till 1. Have I calculated it correctly, Mr. Abel? Okay, quarter till 1, we'll be back. Okay, thank you. See you in 1 hour. For the Zoom, YouTube people, I'm not terminating the hearing. We're just suspending for an hour. I'm not turning my Zoom off. I'm just muting it and closing my camera, and we'll be back in an hour.
Your Honor, for purposes of our witnesses, Mr. Gallagher, did you say you were done with witnesses, or do you have another witness?
That's correct. We completed our witnesses.
Okay.
Okay, so defense, I would be ready to have witnesses when we come back.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right. Have a good lunch, everybody.